Yes, children. Good morning. Now we are going to do the seventh lesson in geography, that is human settlements. So before we move on to the seventh lesson, children, just let me try to remind you of the previous lesson, that is population. I think, children, you might remember that we had learnt about the population of India and Brazil, where we talked about the reasons why we have certain areas where the population density is more and those regions where the population density is sparse. We also talked about conditions favorable for the population to be dense and regions where they are dense or sparse. Now children, let's move over to the seventh lesson, that is human settlements. So what is a settlement? Now settlement is a colony or any small community of people. Okay, so what is a settlement? Settlement is a colony or a small community of people. Now, if a group of people build houses on the moon together, they will have the first lunar settlement. Okay, so when you have the first lunar settlement, that is when you have a group of people who build houses on the moon. So what exactly is a settlement? A settlement is a community in which people live. The complexity of a settlement can range from a small number of dwellings grouped together to the largest of cities with surrounding urbanized areas. So, now the complexity of settlement will range from you have small number of dwellings, so you can have huts, dwellings which are grouped together, to large cities which have urbanized centers. Settlements can also include hamlets, villages, towns or cities. So under settlements we can include hamlets, then we have huts, then we have villages, towns and even cities. A settlement conventionally includes its constructed facilities such as roads, fields, banks, parks, houses, churches, etc. So in a settlement we have all these constructed facilities to serve the people. They are, you have roads, then you have fields, then you have banks, parks, you have houses, churches, etc. So what is a settlement? So children, try to understand what a settlement is. It is a community in which people live. So settlements can range from dwellings to urbanized areas. And under settlements we have hamlets, villages, towns or cities. And all these settlements will be served by roads, fields, banks, houses, etc. So I think children, you have understood what a settlement is. Now this shows you a hamlet. Okay, can you see the hamlet here? The small huts over here. This is a picture of a hamlet. Now look at this. This picture shows you a town. Now here you have cities. Now I suppose you would have understood the difference between houses seen in hamlets and even in cities. So look at the houses here. In cities they are multi-storied. Okay, and you can see the population also. The population is very dense in cities. Okay, houses you have are multi-storied and made up of cement, concrete, etc. Now, let's move over to importance of settlements. Why is settlement important? Now, study of human settlement is essential to human geography because the form of settlement in any region reflects a human relationship with the environment. So, why are settlements important? Now, settlements tell you the relationship between the region as well as the people. So, in case you have region along the coast of say sea coast, or even along the say on the banks of the river, of course you know what the occupation pertaining to people of that region will be. Okay, so the settlement of any region will reflect the human relationship with the environment. A human settlement is defined as a region populated more or less permanently. Most often than not, you find the population in a particular settlement is permanent. So, an agriculturalist or a farmer will have his, house, or will have a settlement just near the field, or say fishermen usually have their settlements near the sea coast. The houses may be planned or redesigned building, or may be remodeled, but the settlement continues. Okay, so in most of these houses you find they are planned, or they can be redesigned or even remodeled, but the settlement will be there. It is more or less permanent. But some settlements can be unstable, and they are occupied for short periods or even seasons. But we find in certain cases, like say the nomadic tribes who move from one place to the other. For example, you can take the case of the Gurjar tribals who move from one region to the other with their herds of cattle and sheep. Here you find the settlements are not permanent because they move from one place to the other with a change in seasons. So, in such cases, the settlements are unstable and are occupied only for short periods or even seasons. So, what is the importance of settlement? Yes, children? Yes. The study of human settlement is essential. It is very, very important because the form of settlement in a particular region will reflect the human relationship with that of the environment. Settlements most often are permanent, but in certain cases, like the tribals who move from one place to the other, we find settlements here are unstable and they last only for short periods or even seasons. Classification of settlements. It is broadly accepted that settlements can be distinguished in terms of urban or rural, but there is no agreement as to what exactly represents a village or a town. So, now most often than not, we can classify settlements into urban or rural, but actually speaking, there is no agreement as to what exactly represents a village or a town. Though population size is an essential criterion, it is not universally accepted since several villages in the densely populated nation of India and China have a population exceeding that of some towns of Western Europe and the United States. Now, when it comes to the size of the population, now here we can say that the population in a village is lesser than that of a town. Okay, but in certain cases, now when you compare the densely populated nations like, say, India or China, with that of the towns of Western Europe and United States, we find the population in India and China is more. In other words, we have the size of population is more in India and China than some of the towns in Western Europe and United States. So, population size may not exactly be the criterion for distinguishing a rural from an urban area. At one time, people residing in villages carried on agriculture or other primary activity as occupation, but today, in developed countries, large settlements of urban population prefer to reside in villages even though they work in towns. Now, what is the occupation of people who reside in the villages? Of course, all of you know it is primary activity. So, people living in villages usually carry on agriculture or allied activities like, say, fishing, or you have lumbering, okay, mining, etc. Okay, but in certain developed countries, we have many people who reside in villages, but they go to work in towns. Okay, did you understand, children? So, now what exactly or how exactly do we classify settlements? Now, normally we can classify settlements as urban or rural. And the essential criterion for classification of settlement is population size. But this doesn't always, happen, because as we said, when we compare India and China with many of the towns, okay, of Western Europe and United States, we find some of the villages in India have population which is more than the towns of Western Europe and United States. Okay, now again, let us come to occupation. Now, people in the villages usually are engaged in agriculture or allied activities. Okay, but if you look at some of the developed countries of the world also, you find many of them, though they go to work in say urban areas or even towns, they of course prefer to settle down in villages. Okay, so what is the basic difference between villages and towns? The basic difference between villages and towns is that in towns, the main occupation of the people is associated with secondary and tertiary sectors, while in the villages, people are mostly engaged in primary occupation like agriculture, fishing, lumbering, etc. So let us come to the difference between villages and towns. Okay, let's compare the occupation. Now, when you compare villages and towns, we find the main occupation of the people in towns are usually associated with secondary and tertiary sectors. That is, say, manufacturing sector, or even, say, trade, communication, transport, etc. But people in the villages are usually engaged in primary activities like agriculture, fishing, lumbering, mining, etc. Now, based on shapes, settlements are classified as compact or nucleated settlements and dispersed settlements. So, children, we have done classification of settlements into rural and urban, okay, but here, based on shapes, we can classify settlements as compact or nucleated and dispersed or scattered settlements. So what is compact or nucleated settlements? These settlements are those in which a large number of houses are constructed very close to each other. So, in a compact or nucleated settlements, we find houses are constructed very close to each other and they are large in number. So, children, I suppose you've understood till now the basic difference between villages and towns, okay, the activities which are carried on by the people in villages and towns, okay. Then again, based on shapes, we said we can classify settlements as compact or nucleated, where we find the large number of houses which are constructed very close to each other. Compact settlements are seen along river valleys and in fertile plains. Here, communities are closely knit and share a common profession. So, usually we find compact settlements along river valleys and also in the fertile plains. And here, most of the people are closely knit, the community is closely knit, and they carry on a common profession. So, usually along the river valleys, we find the occupation carried on by these people is usually agriculture because water is easily available, okay, and fishing also can be carried out. So most of the people share a common profession. Next is we come to dispersed settlements. Dispersed settlements are also called as scattered settlements. Here houses are separated far apart and often scattered with fields. So, in the case of dispersed settlements, the houses are scattered or they are separated or far apart and there are fields. So, what about compact settlements we said? Compact settlements, usually we have houses, okay, and they are usually found along the river valleys and even plains. But in the case of dispersed settlements, the settlements are scattered or separated. A cultural characteristic such as a place of worship or a market forces a settlement to come together. Okay, so in case we have a place of worship, say like a church or even a temple or a mosque, or if there is a market, we find the settlements will come together. Okay, so dispersed settlements are scattered settlements, but in case there is a place of worship like a temple, a mosque, etc., or even a market, the settlements will come closer. Okay, children, so we have gone through the types of settlements, that is rural and urban settlements we have understood. Okay, then according to shapes, we said settlements can be classified as nucleated settlements or compact settlements and dispersed or scattered settlements. Okay, children? Now, here, this is a picture of dispersed settlement. Here you'll find, just look, you find these huts, these houses here, they are far apart. Okay? Now, this is a nucleated settlement. As I said, nucleated settlements you can find along fertile plains or even river valleys. So you can see the river here, okay? And settlements here are close to each other. Did you get that? Okay, found the difference between a nucleated settlement and a scattered settlement. Okay, children? So you understood the difference? So there's a nucleated settlement which is found along the river valley. So with this we have just started with human settlements. Okay, so further we will do the remaining part in the next session. So till then, please go through the lessons here and try to understand the difference between a rural settlement and an urban settlement, and between the compact and nucleated settlements and dispersed settlements. Okay, children, so thank you.